Welcome to the road to greatness. Get ready to be inspired and empowered to take your career to the next level. Let's talk about it. All right, welcome to the road to greatness. I am your host, Carlin Kiefer, and pleased to welcome my very first guest for the podcast, Keisha Zoller. She is a comedian, writer, and showrunner at her core. She's a California neurotic and New York chill. Keisha has worked on Hulu's limited Mike Tyson series, Mike. She's also one of the co-creators and stars of Netflix Astronomy Club, The Sketch Show. Keisha was also a recurring character on the HBO show Divorce, starring Sarah Jessica Parker and Molly Shannon. So aside from all of that greatness, the other reason why I've asked Keisha to join me to kick off the road to greatness is her improv skills. Anyone who knows me personally knows I am a full-blown comedy junkie, so to open with a comedian completely makes sense. However, what most people don't think about at all is how important improv skills are in everyday corporate business life. So, Keisha, welcome. So glad to have you.
Thank you, Carlin. That was like a heck of an intro. I appreciate it.
Hey, I'm so excited to get you here. And like I said, I think you are going to be and I said this not to everybody else, but I said to you personally, you're going to be the glue that holds it all together, right? Because you have the skill set that everybody needs in your ability to do improv. So first, let's just get everybody caught up. If they don't know you from before today, let's give them your background, how you got started in improv, what attracted you to it. Let's hear it.
So improv for me is something I've been doing since college, and I don't want too many people to do the math on my age. Just know I'm an elder millennial, and improv to me was the ability to be able to react, adapt, and play and come up with novel ideas in the moment and allowing for bigger thought and discovery. And when you start doing improv, as I did at like 18, you realize the world is filled with possibilities, that a lot of people come to roadblocks and it's the what can't I do? Versus for me, the improv at its core is what can I do? I've been very fortunate to work with such legendary comedians as Sashir Zameda and Nicole Byer. We were in an all Black girl comedy improv trio called Doppelganger. My sketch show, Astronomy Club, we actually came up doing improv at the Bright Citizens Brigade. And I do improv with my husband. So for me, improv a lot of times was about the freedom to play and think bigger and move past limitations. And how I like to translate that into life is being able to adapt, react to real problems and not sit in the, well, I don't have, I can't do, and the possibility of what you can do. And for a lot of people, that's scary because it means going into the unknown. But for me, it's like, ooh, that's opportunity, that's growth. And that's, I think, as somebody who's worked like as a communication specialist and used improv as a tool for people who've worked in the corporate sector and various other sectors, it's this idea that we can, in our everyday, react to things in a surprising way and create opportunities that we didn't know were there if we're just open to this idea of yes and accepting what is and I think authentically building off of that idea.
Yeah, and that's the piece that I love in the first improv show that I went to years ago. And then, of course, most people have seen Whose Line Is It Anyway? And they don't realize that they really are just thinking in the moment. They're that fast, that moving. And there are so many people who are scheduled and regimented and everything needs to happen exactly this way. And if it doesn't, oh my God, I need 3 days to rebound and to come back. What are some of the things, what were when you first got started and you mentioned at 18? So what were some of the things you found really challenging about getting into improv and really coming up with things in that moment?
For me at 18, and I would say a lot of times in my early 20s, and every so often it comes up, is this idea of, well, what if I'm not enough? What if I can't control? What if I can't focus? What if versus whatever I have to bring is enough? And if I show up and I actually bring myself authentically to the moment and I add, not just I showed up and I'm an empty shell and I'm hoping someone else does the work, but I bring my intelligence, my insight, and trusting that my unique voice is enough. And that when I build with someone else, if I'm reacting, adapting to information, to people, whatever it is, it's enough if I'm actually building with another person. Because for a lot of people, the trust thing is scary because you want to control the interaction. And that's not, at least when you're doing improv comedy, that's not where the laughs come from. They don't come from, I'm going to control. That's more stand up, right? That's more traditional scripted. That's more, super focused. The improv of it is the discovery. And to really be open to discovery, you have to put yourself in there. And once I got over, I'm not blank enough, I'm not this enough, versus I am Keisha Zoller enough. And I will always be Keisha Zoller enough. And at times I might need to pivot, I might need to adapt, I might need to adjust me. Once I came to that holistic revelation, I found a lot of power. I found a lot of power. And I get excited because I also used to teach improv for years and years and years, giving people that source of energy. And when they connect to their authentic self and are able to boldly share it without having to control everything. Because
There
that's the
is
other thing.
yeah, totally true. And I'm sorry that I stepped on your words there. So much though in what you just said. So I'm going to go back and pull little pieces out because I want to dig. So one, destroying the myth that improv means we're teaching people to be funny, right? Because that's not it. And your face says the whole thing like, no, that is not how this works. So let's go through that a little bit because it's people go, but I go to an improv show and I laugh. And some of that laughter for me is one, because they're bringing the authenticity of themselves into the new thing, and you can identify with what's there, like, oh, that happened last week, or I totally would have wished that I have said that to someone when that happened to me last week. Like, I'll do that next time. And it's the relatability, I think, in a lot of the improv. Does that feel right for you?
Yes, I think it's part of the thing is when you play to the top of your intelligence, when you're reacting and adapting as an improviser, you discover the laughs with somebody. And because you discover what the play is of that moment. And like the play is the what's working, right? And when you bring your full self, it's that energy you get when you're like, oh, we just collectively had a great idea together. And it's that rush. And so the desire to keep that ball in the air, I think people have that experience in a lot of aspects of their real lives. They're just not able to label it or understand why it worked or understand how present they had to be able to do that. Because I think for a lot of improv is there's a lot of presence. And when you're present, you're really listening and you're listening without going, well, what am I thinking about? Well, what should I say? Well, what should
We
I
all
do?
become our tap into our inner narcissism, uh, right? Instead of figuring out, well, what's actually happening in the moment. And when you say being present, how many times are we sitting? You're at a restaurant, you're in the movies, you're somewhere, and this is all you see is everybody's texting everyone who's not at the table. And it's like, well, did you even need to come out? Did you need to be together, work together, be in a meeting together? I've sat in I don't know how many different movies in meetings where people at the table, because it's not their time to speak, they're on their phones answering the emails and everything else. How how are you staying so present? How did you break? Because you are an older millennial. So you were born with phones, right? And people my
Yeah.
age were not. Gen X was not. We didn't get phones until we were in college and actually after college. So, how are you staying focused and off the phone and really in that moment? And not that you're going to pick it up, obviously, pick up a phone during an improv or a sketch,
I
but
don't know
how do you
what you
practice that?
mean.
What?
For me, it's about being present when I'm present and doing what I'm doing. And I think a lot of people get it can feel intimidating to be able to understand most things can wait. I have settings on my phone. The people who anytime need to reach me urgently, they can break through my phone. Everyone else can wait because I think there's a difference between urgency and importance. And I'm very lucky. My father has always preached that to me is like urgency and importance aren't the same thing. People will always try to pretend like the urgent thing is the important thing. And if the important thing is being present with the person you love, do the important thing. That email can wait. The social media post can wait. People are fighting for your attention, right? Because your attention is worth something. So if you don't value your attention, if you don't value your focus, no one else will. And for me, it's I'm either present or I'm not.
Mhm.
And
So,
if I have to dip out, I make it very clear of I'm on this limitation. I need 2 minutes and then I'll be back with you.
which is understandable, and who's going to argue with that, right? In that setting and in that timing. Let's back up. Another piece that you mentioned earlier was also talking about, um, along with, I should say, it ties in to being present, but also how the improv when you're doing it better with someone. So if you corporate executives, you have sales teams, you have marketing teams, you have event teams. You have people who have to even they don't think if they don't think about it that way, they have to co-facilitate, co-present, develop a concept or an idea, roll out something together, and may not be thinking about their ability to build off of each other. They're just thinking about their parts. How do you prepare with someone for an improv? It's supposed to be improv, but how are you actually saying, okay, I'm ready to be with this person and create something fabulous?
It this all ties together for me is this idea of working on presence. It's looking someone in the eye. It's actually talking to them. It's, it in going back to theater school, we do mirroring exercises where two people would just really quiet and focus on another person and focus on being with another person. And that to me is a lot of it. It's, talking to the people before and remembering that we can share in this, right? We may have our roles. However, I feel less anxious if I know someone has my back. That's an improv term people use all the time where it's like, I got your back. And it's really saying, it's like, if you drop the baton, I will pick it up because we can still win this relay race if we're playing as a team. And for me, in my work with a lot of folks, the larger team I've noticed is a disconnect from the mission statement, right? A mission statement, when you really, as an employee, as a worker, as somebody who's a leader, whatever it might be, when we disconnect that we're all working on a mission statement, it's the reminder we're all on a team. And it's a reminder that we have a focus and that we can be present because we're in service of something. And that to me is what improv has taught me a lot is like, you slow down, you look at someone in the eyes, and you let them know that I support you to the best of my abilities. And, when that support is reciprocated, magic can happen. However, when we shut down or like, I'm staying in my lane, as you were talking, the first image that popped in my mind was Squid Games. Then it becomes the competition of, gotta
The
cross
imagery
that
for
last
that.
bridge. Yes.
They're trying to cross the field. Ah!
And it's like, there's not enough. And that frantic thing doesn't necessarily allow for novelty the same way. Because I think, and my husband and I talk about this all the time, there's stagnation in innovation. And innovation comes from when we can build outside of ourselves and be inspired outside of ourselves. It means we're really listening to people who may not have seniority or may not be directly tied in a linear fashion to the way we're going, because innovation is putting novel things together. And if we're not searching for the novelty, the play, the unknowingness, which is directly tied to improv, we're not going to get it. And so I love improv because for me, it's about embracing that novelty and opportunity, and play can make things really exciting and surprising and allow you to do things that are grander and more beautiful than what you may have set out.
Yeah, I have clients who are negotiators, and we talk a lot about the importance of improv and embracing the unknown, because no one goes into a negotiation knowing everything from the opposite side of the table, right? And when you go into a sales setting, no one knows what's happening on the opposite side. And so it's the going in with the openness, it's the flexibility, and we work on and talk about, okay, so what are your what if plays, and not what if all the negative things. When we first started speaking, you talked about too many people are in their heads thinking about what if this negative, that negative. We actually, in pro tip partner classes and workshops, we focus on the what if so that you can plan for some of the what ifs, but also be okay, plan for the what if I have no idea and they say something completely bizarre, then what, right? It's planning for that as well. And it's planning for the improv, that you know you're going to have to do it at some point. What's the play? And what do you do? And that also helps even with the teamwork. You can do a lot of things around teamwork, but it's also getting everybody, as you said, to be open enough to trust that their other team member has their back. So let's start there, or let's pick up on that, having your back and having this as a team play. What are some of the activities when you were learning improv, when you were teaching improv? What are some of the things, the activities to do to practice building that trust? Because we all remember, at least maybe I had a tragic childhood, not sure, but when you made a mistake right around the third or fourth grade, that's when you learned everybody was going to laugh when you weren't perfect. So we stop taking risks. And as you get older, you stop taking risks. You stop trusting your colleagues around because you're afraid either they're going to laugh, they're going to make you look bad, they're going to do whatever. You got to break through that, obviously, when you're doing improv, because you've got to go wherever it's going. What are some of the things you do to get that initial trust in place so that people are just open enough to try and not worry about who's laughing, who's looking, who's pointing?
For me, one of the first images that popped into my head as you were saying this, just getting in your body, trusting your body, that what you say, it might not be perfect, it might not be elegant, it might fit what you said. So trusting yourself, so getting in your body, thinking about like, well, how do I warm up? Theater actors have to warm up, improvisers warm up. How do you trust your body? And if you haven't spoken to anyone all day, and you have been sitting at your desk, it's very hard to trust in that moment. You're like, oh, how do I talk to a person? You probably will have some like rust and dust that you need to shake off. So first it's getting present in your body. Next, it's looking at somebody, right? And really just trying to have an authentic conversation. And sometimes it's laughing. It's how do we interact? And ways of building trust for me is allowing for play. When people talk about the what ifs, as you were talking about the what ifs, if you have a goal in mind that you're trying to do, why not play with the other person about what could happen, and in a low stakes way of like, oh, well, they definitely do this. Or it's like, yeah, but what if they had a silly voice, whatever that means to you, that can initiate a way of playing and breaking out of a narrow view of how this might go, right? Because I think the more you get into the tunnel vision of like, well, they'd never have a silly voice. It'd be like, yeah, we're just playing, right? We're just rehearsing. What happens if we're doing a negotiation and we're also just like drinking Mai Tais on the beach for this? And
I
we're
sign
just
up for that, by the way.
and you're like, I didn't know this is where the negotiation would happen.
That's right. And you've got to figure out, okay, so then what will I do? Yeah, the what if game definitely allows and actually encourages, and it's good to have someone in the room who really, really understands and owns that what if. So from a perspective, as you were saying, what if they start talking in a crazy voice, right? And
Yeah.
they have that moment. It's like, well, we would stop. No, you wouldn't. You have to just figure out, okay, Carlin swallowed something and inhaled helium while no one was paying attention. She got this voice out. So I love that. Um, and that lets other people see, okay, it's okay to be silly during this time or figure this out because we're exploring what's
And it's okay
actually about to happen.
to be human. It's okay to be like, we are all unpredictable. I think that's the thing, is like, uh it's why AI hasn't yet taken over everything.
Although it's
and
trying.
and if you watch enough of the Terminators, you see humanity's greatest thing is our novelty, is our discovery, because we can create and we can smash ideas together in new ways without it being rote. And that's the thing, no matter what, people keep pushing back. And so part of that is allowing yourself to have that play, to have that connection with another human being in those moments. And for some of us, it's like, shaking out. For some of us, it's like, how was your week? Right? What are you
Mhm.
doing? It's about connecting of, okay, let's talk about the new Taylor Swift album, or not talk about it, whatever it is, and allowing a connection to form. So how do you build trust? You allow connection to form.
Yeah,
And
the relationship piece is absolutely huge, both in improv, business, every line of work that there is. I'm sorry, go ahead.
yeah, relationships to yourself, to the other person, and letting it build, and also knowing that trust takes time. There's a reason why an improv will make silly faces, and it's about passing a silly face, taking information, giving it fast, taking information, giving it fast. Keep track of this ball. Let's see if we can mirror each other together. Let's see if we can build one word at a time. Because it's this idea of, once you get used to that feeling of being able to let go and be present and excited of, this is where, I think a lot of times people think of improv is like, it must mean nothing. No, it's rehearsing the skill of, all right, I have a task. The task is to build one word at a time story. So I have an agenda. I have a thing I'm trying to accomplish. I also have to let go and really listen within that agenda to accomplish it.
All right, it is just time now for us to take a quick break. We're going to go and come back. And when we come back, Keisha and I will go through a little improv activity to see how good I am at this. Well, no, let's not use that as a judgment. Stay with us. We'll be right back.
Are you ready to elevate your team's performance? Introducing Pro Tip Partners. With over 20 years of experience in enablement and learning and development, we've helped businesses like yours achieve amazing growth outcomes. Our focus areas include sales enablement and effectiveness, manager and leadership development, and our unique Improv for Business workshops, helping your teams enhance their confidence and ability to embrace the unknown. For your customer-facing teams, we provide professional communication training to make presentations engaging and interactive. At Pro Tip Partners, all our workshops are engaging, fun, and build on best practices for proven business growth. For companies needing a fractional executive to jumpstart new initiatives without increasing headcount, we're your go-to partner. Visit us at protippartners.com or call 301-4PROTIP for a free needs assessment. Pro Tip Partners, elevating performance, empowering growth.
So the one word activity is one thing that I use often as an icebreaker, because ever since I started it, I learned it about a year ago when I took an improv for sales class. And one thing that I took away was the building the one story at a time. Let's give everybody an idea of what that actually looks like. So you can start, I can start, however which way you want to go, but let's just do maybe a couple of sentences or, to just give them an idea. And since you are the guest and the expert, why don't I let you start the one word and folks can see how this actually works. We'll build it one story at a time.
One,
Day,
I,
left,
my,
keys,
in,
the,
car,
and,
I,
locked,
the,
door,
to,
my.
car. Breathe.
Thank you.
Breathe. Because that's the thing, having access and, sorry to be an improv teacher. I see
Do
you.
it. Let's do it.
Breathe. Breath connects you to your mind. It connects you to your intelligence.
Yes. Lock the door to my car. So without
My
spare.
keys.
Ah! So
I
went
to
my
neighbors
house,
and
grabbed
their
shovel,
and
broke,
their
went there. Oh, window,
to
get
their
axe,
and
break,
my
car,
window.
to
Get
my.
keys.
Yay. And saved the dog. All right. See,
Yeah.
that works.
Yeah. Listen, I didn't know where it was going, right?
Right.
I was
Clearly,
like,
I had to take a pause.
well, and the thing is, it's like things I would, for me, do is like, even hearing myself as an improviser, I was like, oh, even setting up more specifics, I could have supported you. However, for me, the goal I was trying to accomplish is just being present, and like the presence, the breathing. This is where it's like a little bit about me. I did go to acting school. I actually have a terminal degree in acting. And one of the things I like to think about is we don't breathe. When we think and breathe, a lot of people, they're like, thinking is not breathing. That's the opposite. Have you ever tried to run while holding your breath? You pass out. Don't do
Yes.
it. Why do you try to think and connect to your breath? Drop your breath. Breathe.
Yeah.
Breathe.
One thing, and because I can't help but make some connections back to what I do on the day-to-day with Pro Tip Partners is with the one word activity and us going one word and building the story one at a time. Where does that go? One, it's learning to be present, as you said. Two, remembering, for me, learning to breathe when I didn't have the word right away. But it's also when you're doing team presentations, the number of times that you have to pick up off of someone else and go where they're going and make it sound fluid, especially if you're selling. If you're selling, you've got to sound like you're all one voice, even though you have different people speaking at the table, all one voice. So you practice that, and it allows you to be very present, and you're not working on your next part. You're listening to what your colleague is saying to make sure that the meeting is going very well, and the like. So I thank you for one, being easy on me.
Great job. Great job.
And recognizing that apparently I like to break things, which I'm not sure that I knew, but that's okay.
Discovery is important.
Yes, yes. So one of the things that our viewers and listeners may not also know is that you, and especially during the writer's strike, you also, and actually, and I say it's especially during, I know that it was also long before then, you did improv training for businesses. Mm-hmm. And that is something that, again, it's taking the funny piece out, but it's bringing it into the business world and business life. What are some of the other, first of all, why did you find that important? Even though I feel like we've covered it a little bit here and there, but it makes sense to add on why it's important for the business.
I think a lot of times we're not really communicating. And improv to me is that reacting, adapting, and communicating from an authentic place. And a place that when this is my personal belief. I believe when people are holding on to their authenticity and being able to understand their goals and to build, to be flexible and to be open to connection, I see magic happen. I see people being able to do things. And a lot of times I've met resistance because people are like, well, what happens when you have to tell somebody no or give somebody critical information? I was like, you can still do that through yes and because you're doing it from a place of like, okay, so I hear this and my concerns, or I'm not sure that works with, and that's adding information. It's revealing and giving more. So why I love it, it's reminding people that we build and that a lot of times, without calling anybody out, the joke is a lot of people are on their phones and they're not present, or
Mm-hmm.
they want to just kind of get through it so they can do their work versus if you are working in any sort of team, unless it is purely your company, you have no one you work with, you have no customers, you are going to interact with someone. And so these skills are about that. And the number of times I've said, when you take improv and you take listening and really building and playing and being present with somebody else outside this, and you bring it even into your real lives, your relationship with your kids goes deeper because you get to be present with them and you're really building with them and you're getting to know them.
Mm-hmm.
You're not just barking orders, or you take it with a spouse. When you really listen, and listening is more than just what they say, it's how they say it. It's the passion, it's the intensity, it's the excitement, it's the frustration, it's the sadness. When you really listen,
Mm-hmm.
you're able to repeat back things that you're just like, oh, I wasn't aware that my partner said fine. They're not fine. It's like I hear you say fine, my yes, and I feel like I'm hearing something else underneath that. And I want you to know I support you and I'm concerned, right?
Right.
That
And
opens up. And
yeah.
so we live in a world where we interact with people and reminding ourselves that whether it's public facing, B2B, or within your own team, you're dealing with people. And that's why I'm
Yes.
passionate. And when you remind everybody you're dealing with people, that's also the power of your organization. That's the power of your work, that you're dealing with people.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I so much of what you've said resonates, especially on the listening front. And you use the word that I use all the time, which is fine. I always say there are 50 ways to say the word fine. If you're a teenager, fine is fine, right? And if you're coming home from work, how was your day? Fine. And or it could be fine, right? Any which way. And what we talk about in the delivery skills side of the presentation classes are around really the importance of what you've just said, the importance of paying attention to the body language and the voice tone. People, yes, the words, but how those words manifest, the impact of those words, 93% of that is based on voice tone and body language. And so if you aren't paying attention to those two, because you're not present, you're just hearing Charlie Brown's teacher talking in your ear, you are missing half the conversation in a lot of things, which again, from a business standpoint, starts to create some problems and some disconnect with whether it's customers, colleagues, employees, bosses, managers, whomever. It starts to create some disconnect.
Mm-hmm. And people feel the disconnect even if we don't have words, because that's the other thing. When I keep saying we're dealing with people, we are feeling beings.
Yes.
And we feel these things over time, even if we don't have the language for it. When somebody makes you feel excited and present and joyous, you want to see them more. And when someone makes you feel dour and bummed and frustrated, you're like, oh no, my phone, right? And I say that because it's also like, pay attention to that feeling. Well, how can I connect to that person? How can I listen to that person? Like, there's all different tactics and ways of communicating and ways of pivoting your expectations too to address those folks. However, I think sometimes we disconnect from the fact that we live in a feeling-based world that influences how we communicate facts, how we communicate information. And the information is important. And how we come across is important. And how we do it is important. And it's interesting because it feels either or. And everybody's authentic voice is different. And when you can have someone lean into their authentic voice and understand that it will be different, there's a power there. Some people have a more monotone way of speaking. Some people speak a mile a minute, and that's just the way they speak. And they're very, there's ways.
Yes, I've been accused of that.
Sorry, Carlin. This is me coming here to talk about that. You thought this podcast was something else. It's not, JK.
The intervention, yes. So what has there ever been in your training, in the activities, the exercises that you do, or and even in sketch, has there been a time where you yourself have been stumped? And how do you, because we all get it at some point, hence we just saw that with me 3 minutes ago, but how do you get yourself out of that so you aren't paralyzed and stop where you are?
For me, I acknowledge, breathe, and kind of just say the feeling of, whoa, that's a lot. Or, gotta process. I let myself feel the information and take it in. Because if I go, and shut down versus like, whew, I need to process that. Or just like we would in real life. And you'd be surprised in an improv scene how just doing that gets a laugh. The reason why, when we get faced with a lot and people are like, oh, I have a solution. It's like, well, did you hear what was just said? did you, because an acknowledgement is powerful. And I think people forget how important acknowledgements are. Acknowledging, okay, that was rough. that was rough. It didn't go the way we wanted. Yeah. I need to sit with that to be able to share more. Even just being able to say that feels scary because it's vulnerable, because it puts us in the place of not knowing and openness. And it puts us in the place of like, I am not an expert. And the fact that we live in a world that at times feels like we have to be an expert in everything at all times is really not sustainable, not healthy. And again, leads to myopic thinking and not innovative thinking.
Mm-hmm. So put that from the perspective of a manager, and because that's the first person who comes to mind for me is someone who's leading a team and they're hit with something either from their manager and they're going, oh, that's not right. Or how are we supposed to do that? Or I didn't see that one coming, right? There are any number of feelings that a manager could have. And then they feel like they need to, when they're transferring information to their teams, they feel like, oh, and now I've got to say it in this way that's super formal or a way that's perfect. How does that adjust that for me?
For me, it's about, are you trying to create intrinsic energy around a pivot point or a crisis moment? Or are you trying to be a king?
Or queen.
Queen. Yes. And for me, that comes down to, are you disseminating information so we can pivot and do our best to do what we need to? Or are you being like, you do this? And there's a disconnect. And for me, I always think about it is like, how do you communicate? It's like, look, this information doesn't feel great. I'm not going to sugarcoat it. And I know there's a solution out there and it might take time. We're on a crunch. So let's really carve out the time to be efficient. And we're going to have to create some openness. So let's have a space for no bad ideas and really think expansively. And then we're going to have to work very quickly to get into focus. So that's my plan. And I acknowledge I don't have all the answers at this moment. And I'm grateful to have you as a team.
Yeah. And then that gives openness for them to actually be able to respond or not feel overly frustrated, as someone who has been a member of that team at some point or another and been like, so do you even know how bad whatever is that just came down is? Because you're blowing smoke or you're actually ignoring the parts that don't make sense or whatever. So to be able to be forthcoming and not have all the answers and then figure it out together, or offer it up and say, hey, and one of the exercises we do, that's a bit of I wouldn't call it improv per se, but it does get you in the mindset to be looking at the solutions. The yes and, as you were saying, is the what's good about it exercise. So you do something that's absolutely ridiculous. For me, it's always, let's put the engine of a car on the roof of the car instead of under the hood. And then everybody's got to go around and give at least two things of what's good about it. And they're, well, that's stupid. Who would do that? Well, that's not a good answer. And it's somebody eventually will say, well, it makes it easier to clean the engine, and they start looking at, okay, so you can find some positive way to move forward. And then you can actually then address the brainstorming the issue of what the real issue is at hand, with a different mindset. And that's what I love. The improv activities are just getting you in the right mindset to be open.
And if you notice, the reason I wanted to give that as an example, as an act out, was I didn't say we weren't on a timeline. I didn't say we weren't going to have to push.
Right.
That's the thing, is like, I think people take it as like, oh, well, so I was like, no, I can be direct. I can push.
Mm-hmm.
We can have to like grind. However, if we know what the expectation, and it feels like I'm going to get the new information as it comes down, or I am going to have a level of transparency, or I just told you, you're going to have to grind. Okay, so I'm going to have to rethink my outings for the next week, but at least now I have the information to plan versus, yeah, so that didn't go so well. We'll talk about it. Hey, I know now we have to really hustle. I was like, we had a whole week. I wasn't doing anything this week. I could have, right? And then you have
been there.
and then you have the frustration of, I had a week. And that creates frustration all around. And that frustration creates whispers, and those whispers create dissent. And that's the thing that I think when we talk about creating intrinsic motivation, energy, there's a way to just be blatant and be like, listen, I can't give you all the details at this moment, but trust me, when I will support and empower you as best I can at every step. And if there is moments where I'm going to need you to work harder and I can have any foresight, I will let you know. So I'm going to ask for your flexibility, and I'm going to honor you by returning it. Right. And it's thinking about those ways where you could just say the thing. And it feels scary, but improv has taught me that sometimes you can just say the thing in a way that's like direct. It can feel scary. However, it makes people feel better long term, even in the short term where you're like, wow, that's a lot. It's like, yeah, it is a lot. But now you can sit with it. And now you're not just going around being like, oh, everyone's stressed, like something's happening. I wish someone would talk to me.
Yeah.
Ugh.
Right. No, that's true. And the whispers, I think you've nailed that one because we've all been in a scenario where the whispers start and the whispers, as you said, get into the dissent. They also get into the lack of productivity because you spend more time talking about the thing than addressing the thing, whatever that may be. So yes, if improv can give that freedom on the manager side to be open and upfront and transparent, which we hear people talk. Transparency is so important, but are they really? You haven't been transparent till we've played one of the games in the improv piece for the inherent connection or increased connection, the relationship building, the trust, right, and the ability to just go with the flow and the flexibility. Are there any situations that you can share without divulging, or I should say it in your Hollywood way? Let's say it from a perspective of, are there any situations in protecting the names of the guilty and the innocent? Are there situations where when you were doing corporate training with the improv activities where there was an aha? What's an aha that somebody had after going through an improv activity? First, what was the activity? Because we need to know what they did. And then let's talk about what was the aha that came out of that changed the business?
A lot of, without getting too specific, the aha was, oh, I can change my attitude to how I come to this information.
Ooh, tell me more about that.
Warming up before you give somebody, playing, and even making the choice to be like, I'm going to share this, but I'm going to be mindful of how, and the aha of, are you speaking to talk? Or are you speaking to be heard by people? A lot of people don't necessarily speak. It's that thing of like, I just want to talk, blah, 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 blah. And you're just like, okay, versus talking as connection, right? I like to think of it a lot of times when people give speeches, some of the best ones, they're having a conversation. And that's improv, right? Because you're always in conversation with something. You're always reacting and adapting. Even if you're giving a long monologue, you're reacting and adapting. So some of the best ones where people were like, oh, I'm not listening. I'm not reacting. I'm just going with my plan and I don't care about anyone else. And me not caring about anyone else is having other people realize and pick up on that feeling. They just don't have the words for it. So they check out. So they're not as interested in me. Oh, that's why I need to go talk to my wife.
She was right.
Yeah. And like sometimes it's business related, sometimes it's deeply personal because they start to see, wow, I'm checked out of my life.
Yeah.
I'm checked out of my life. And checked out of my life is, in business and at home, right? And if I'm checked out and I show up to work and I'm checked out, people feel that, versus saying, hey, I'm just processing a lot right now. So if I'm not showing up the way that I normally am, I apologize. People surprisingly give a lot of space when people say that. And it doesn't mean you have to disclose. It just means that you are a thinking, feeling human being. So when people really listen, and like, I think it was that thing of really, really listen and including themselves, listening to themselves. And so the deep listening, the listening to your heart, listening to the room you're in, listening to the outside, listening to the fact that if you're having a meeting and it's an all glass conference room and it's a really hot day and your AC's acknowledging that, like, all right, maybe we need to take off jackets, or should we try to change room, or let's pull down the shades, or maybe we could do this outside where we're not in a green.
It's getting all hot, humid, and funky.
Yeah, even just acknowledging those things.
Right. Yeah.
is really powerful to people. And so for me, it's the lack of listening, because it's my agenda, not our agenda.
Yes, absolutely. So I've been taking notes throughout everything that we've been talking about and really honing in on what the key skill sets are really to be good at improv, and then also how improv will help on the flip side help you hone those same skills to use in business life. So active listening, obviously, and I would even go so far as to say not just active listening, engaged listening. So it's more I heard the words and took it all in. It's now I'm engaged because I'm trying to figure out then how do we connect better. So engaged listening. Certainly there is a piece of the memory part, and if you are present, you actually can remember more of what was said. The connection piece, relationship building, and that's in this exercise, that's in our business relationship, that's in our friendship. We've talked about spouses and children and everyone else, and then maybe the teenagers will stop saying, oh, you just don't understand. So there's certainly a piece to take home with that. The emotional intelligence piece, because you have to be willing to know that what you're doing in this activity or you're doing in this improv exercise is something that is helping me grow and not something I should be embarrassed by or have shame or not go all in, because this is helping me to be better. It is helping me to be great. And then the most important part, I think, is the ability to pivot and react to people in the moment as opposed to just nodding or saying like, yes, or okay, I hear you, right? It's being able to move as the conversation flow, as the information, as the data changes, you can change and go along with that. Is there anything that I missed out of those?
There's one thing that I think is important, and it's taking a risk.
Yeah.
And risk is different for everyone and in every context. What does risk management look like for you as a person, look like for you within your build, like in your work? Risk is also daring to do something that pushes a little bit. And when you create those relationships, and even that relationship with yourself, it can fail, and you will fail. However, you can learn, and you can have the ability to learn. And again, I think a lot of stagnation and a lack of innovation comes from a fear of risk. There is risk. Staying stagnant is also risk. It might feel safe, but it is risky, because that is not the way the world works. We are marching forward. Time goes on. So, there's ways to play with risk where you can have playful chats and talks and, a good think thunk about how you can do risk. However, it's like risk is movement, is where are we going? And so I think it's important to think about, like, there's big risk, little risk. And for me, it's my husband and I, we talk about this all the time, having space to play as an intellectual experience in big risk. Because what will you learn? You learn something about your values. You learn something about your organizational values, because it might be wrong. If it's wrong, what did you learn?
Right.
If this risk isn't right for you, I also think it's like, okay, I want to take this big risk. Okay, that's not right for us. That is right for this other business that would be a great partner one day.
Right.
Great. We could build that relationship, because I can now offer something to someone else that could be of benefit. And now we're building a relationship. And relationships can help us pivot. They can help us give new information. This can build trust in surprising and new ways. So that's where I think risk is worth it, especially if it's like, we play because you can rehearse risk too.
Mm-hmm.
I think a lot of times people think I was like, nope, you just skydive and that's it. I was like, whoa, whoa,
No,
whoa,
thank
whoa,
you. Try indoor skydiving first.
whoa. Trying indoor skydiving, tandem skydiving,
There you
hit
go.
your hours, and that's all playing to the big moment.
Yes.
But
Yes.
that
It's
doesn't
doing the
mean,
work. Everybody wants that overnight thing, and it's doing the work that gets you there. Yeah.
and I truly believe this. You're never done doing the work until you're dead, which sounds a bit morbid.
Morbid.
But what I mean by that is there's always, like, if you talk to the great improvisers, they always talk about there's always room to grow. There's always room to improve. You can always keep showing up. And one of my dad has a friend who's almost 100, and she said something to me years and years ago where she was like, I just never stopped growing. I never stopped being curious. I never stop that. That's how you get to 100. This is a woman who's created businesses, written books, and been wildly successful in a diverse amount of fields. And it comes from you can still give new insights. You might have to pivot. You might have new information. You might have to take new risks, but you're here. So, like, for me, you know, that's the exciting thing is that, like, and it can feel scary and in the unknown. You
Mm-hmm.
can also prepare ways that there's pillows. So when you take that leap, you can fall because you're not ready to jump out of the plane yet. And that's okay. Everybody wants it now. I think there's a lot of beauty in building.
Mm-hmm.
And when you build with people, you mitigate your risk and they mitigate their risk because we're not alone. That's why I keep saying we're feeling people. We
Right.
can make community. We can empower. And it could be like you can make a friend with somebody in a completely different organization that, like, okay, you can't help each other directly, but you can help each other because you have connection. You can give each other novel ideas.
Right. Be a sounding board, offer feedback, any of the
Mhm.
things. Absolutely.
And so that's where it's like, I like to add, like, the one asterisk is, and take a risk. And that means something different for everybody. And
Right.
I think don't measure your risk next to somebody else's because what is risky for you might be totally safe for somebody else.
Yes. Absolutely true. And vice versa, right? Their safety spot or your safety spot will be something that is way out of control. I'll get up on a stage, I will talk in a heartbeat and do that. But if we look at the top 10 list of fears, public speaking is number one. Death is number 7, by the way. And as Jerry Seinfeld used to say, that means that you'd rather be in the casket than delivering the eulogy. Right. And for me, like, I will talk all day long and not a big deal. So yes, it's stretch for what makes sense for you, and it's take the risk for whatever risk means to you. And when you're in an improv activity or exercise, know that you're going into it so you can figure out how you're going to grow that during that time. How will you be better off coming out on the other side versus when you go in?
Yeah.
And so we're almost at time here. So I am going to come back to you, Keisha, and just ask if there is anything I like to close with. Is there anything I didn't ask and should have?
No, when we were talking about presence and, like, being present, I was like, I'm really enjoying being present with you. And knowing that this conversation isn't over, right? There's always a possibility for more. And, you know, the only thing I'd like to share is I want more people to be present in their life and adapt and reactive to their life. Uh, in business, in personal, in interactions on the street. It is powerful, it is special. Because even though it might be number 7 in terms of fears, our time is short. And so enjoy this. So even on a hard day, you can find presence, and it can be hard and you can acknowledge it. However, what a special thing we have. And that to me is what improv has really taught me, that like I get to be present, I get to share, and I get to make connections like with you, Carlin.
Well, thank you. And I appreciate that connection. And we will continue to stay connected as we start to roll out the Improv for Business classes with Pro Tip partners so that people can actually start working on this. But hopefully, we'll have folks tune in throughout season 1 and have so that they can listen to master negotiators, TV hosts, best-selling authors. We've got marketing executives, salespeople, you name it, every industry, and hear about their road to greatness, number one, but also where their pivots, where their mind agility comes into play with their success, because it really is what helps make up your secret sauce. So with that, Keisha, I would love to invite you to come back at the end of season 1. We can pull all of the highlights from the previous episode. So we'll have our best of, and then we can talk about what are some of the improv activities or what are some of the things that we can do to practice some of the pathways in terms of the road to greatness that others have talked about that they used. How can we practice that via improv? And then we can get the closing end of that. And when we close out season 1, would you be open to coming back?
Yes. And
yes, and that's how we're going to keep going. All right. And on that note, thank you all for joining us on the inaugural episode of The Road to Greatness. Go out there, find your path, and then tune back in for our next episode. Look forward to seeing you. This has been The Road to Greatness. Remember to subscribe, follow, and share, and I'll see you next time.